From useless to undying, the forgotten hero who mastered the forest's heart through a ridiculed skill, nurtured life amid destruction, and defied fate without blade or glory. The legend of the Kinomi master, whose seeds silenced a demon king and whose roots grew stronger than any kingdom's crown. They summoned me with fire in their eyes and crowns on their heads, branding me a hero before I even understood where I was. I arrived in this foreign world wearing the same wrinkled shirt I had slept in the night before, confused, overwhelmed, and filled with a naive hope that this was some kind of second chance. Perhaps that was my first mistake, assuming that destiny owed me anything at all. The ceremony was radiant, almost theatrical. Light, gold, and sacred chants surrounded us as the king's priests bestowed skills upon each summoned warrior. They went down the line with purpose. One after another, my companions were gifted extraordinary talents: divine swordsmanship, fire domination, and heavenly healing. Cheers erupted with each announcement, as if the air itself vibrated with reverence. Then it was my turn. "Kinomi master!" A hush swept the room. Confused glances, then laughter. Nervous, awkward chuckles at first, but it quickly spiraled into a full-blown mockery. I didn't understand why until I saw the reactions of nobles suppressing snorts, generals frowning with pity, and the king sighing like he'd just seen a cracked goblet among his wine collection. No one explained what it meant, but the disgust in their expressions was enough. Later, I learned it translated to something like Master of Nuts. That was my divine gift. In a world where monsters breathed shadow and death rode on the backs of dragons, I had the sacred power to understand and harvest nuts. My companions avoided my eyes after that, and I couldn't blame them. I avoided mirrors, too. They still brought us into battle in those early days. For a time, I marched with them, always relegated to the back, my contributions unrecognized, my advice ignored. I tried to gather information to see if maybe there was more to my skill, but my voice didn't carry weight. Why would it? I wasn't a swordsman. I wasn't a mage. I was a joke in a soldier's armor. The turning point came on a cold morning in the frontier mountains. We'd been sent to scout a known stronghold of the Demon King's forces. The plan was simple reconnaissance, nothing more. But it was a trap. A horde of demons descended from the cliffs, and panic spread through the party like wildfire. We were outnumbered, overwhelmed. I fought with everything I had, hurling rocks and even bare-fisted punches. It wasn't valor. It was desperation. After the skirmish, our numbers were thinned. We made camp in the ruins of an old temple. That night, they whispered near the fire. They didn't think I heard, but I did. The Nutman had slowed them down. I was dead weight. Someone suggested they make it look like I fell during the attack. Another laughed. They agreed. They took my bag while I was sleeping, stripped me of rations, and walked off into the dawn. I woke alone, shivering, abandoned in a hostile land where even the trees looked like they wanted me gone. I didn't scream, I didn't cry. I just sat there, motionless, until the sun touched the mountains again. I should have died. But that was when it happened. It was almost pathetic, the first moment of my so-called awakening. I tripped, stumbled into a thicket, and hit my head against a gnarled old tree. In my daze, a nut dropped onto my chest. It was smooth, silver-veined, and pulsing faintly with warmth. I stared at it, then at the leaves above. There were dozens of similar nuts with strange glows, symbols etched into their shells like ancient scripture. My gut told me it was important. I ate it. The moment it hit my tongue, I felt it. A warmth flooded my limbs, and the pain in my bruised body dulled. The system window appeared in my vision like a ripple across glass. Consumed silver nut, minor regeneration activated for 10 minutes. Something cracked open inside me, a door I didn't know existed. My skill has been activated. Kinomi Master wasn't useless, it was misunderstood. I became obsessed after that. I scoured the mountains, cataloging every nut-bearing plant I could find. Each new species bore its own miracle. There were nuts that strengthened muscles, sharpened perception, and boosted mana flow. Some even granted momentary elemental resistances. I kept tasting, testing, and learning. For the first time since my summoning, I felt purpose not given by others, but born from within. The forest became my crucible. Weeks turned into months. I learned to identify Kinomi by leaf shape, bark texture, and the rhythm of their blooming. I learned how to grind them into powders, distill their oils, and infuse them into salves. My body changed too, no longer soft from city life, but lean, weathered, and attuned to nature's tempo. There was one nut, the Night Core, that granted brief bursts of supernatural speed. Another, called Ember Core, gave me fire resistance for an hour. When combined, they let me hunt beasts that once terrified me. I fought, I survived, and I grew stronger with every cycle of the moon. I built a shelter high in the canopies beyond the reach of monsters, crafted tools with hardened shells, wove armor from bark and spider silk. I was no longer prey. I was the forest's sun, its chosen, its echo. Sometimes travelers came close to the forest. I watched from above, hidden by branches and silence. Their clothes bore the crest of the kingdom. They hunted beasts. Some were the same faces who had mocked me, now worn, older, and humbled by years of battle. I didn't reveal myself. What would be the point? I had my life now, a quiet strength, untouched by their world of titles and crowns. But rumors spread. Whispers of a forest spirit who could cure ailments, of strange powders that healed the gut or sharpened the eye. I didn't ask for attention, but it came anyway. A wandering merchant stumbled upon me one summer. He was half dead from a venom bite. I gave him an antidote from a crushed serpent nut, and in return, he left me coins and gratitude. I didn't care for the gold, but he spread tales. Soon others followed. Adventurers came seeking Kinomi. Alchemists wanted to buy my seeds. Nobles sent letters offering land in exchange for exclusive rights. I ignored them all. My grove was sacred. It was not for sale. Still, the world would not leave me alone. One autumn, a girl arrived. She was different, quiet, curious, and respectful. She watched me for 3 days before daring to speak. I didn't reply, but I didn't chase her off either. She left offerings of dried fruits, cloth, and books on herbalism. Over time, I grew used to her presence. She didn't ask for power. She only wanted to learn. I taught her by action, not words. She watched my methods, took notes, and practiced with diligence. Eventually, I handed her a nut I had never given to anyone else, the bloom nut, capable of growing a sprout even in dead soil. She understood its worth. She cried when she received it. After she left, I began to dream more vividly of memories of my old world, of the stale air in my tiny apartment, and of the flickering monitor light in my lonely room. This forest, this life, was a far cry from that empty existence. And yet, I had never felt more whole. I wasn't anyone's hero. I wasn't a summoner's puppet. I was myself. But the world outside was changing. The Demon King had not been idle. His armies swept across the plains, burning villages and destroying fortresses. My former companions and the chosen heroes were faltering. Some had fallen. Others vanished. Their legendary skills meant nothing without discipline, without growth. They had relied too heavily on what was gifted, not earned. One night, the girl returned, battered and pale. She knelt in my grove and begged not for herself, but for her village. A general of the Demon King had descended upon them. They had no weapons, no warriors. I said nothing. I walked into my grove, gathered 3 seeds, and placed them in her palm. The message was clear. She would fight with what I had given. She left with resolve in her eyes. Days later, word came from travelers. A village had repelled a demon battalion using mysterious powder bombs and enchanted nuts. The forest alchemist, they called it, the nut sage. I never claimed the title, but I didn't reject it either. If the world insisted on naming me, let it be for what I truly was. The trees whispered to me then, and I knew the time for solitude was ending. I prepared slowly, not for war, but for purpose. I mixed the strongest Kinomi essences I had cultivated. I brewed salves for resilience, nuts for stamina recovery, and oils that could burn even demon hide. My armor, now fused with the earth nut's bark plating, could withstand blade and flame alike. When I walked down the mountain for the first time in years, the wind carried the scent of Kinomi pollen and the silent reverence of every step I had taken to reach this point. I was no longer the man they had abandoned. I was the Kinomi master. The village was already burning by the time I arrived. The skies were choked with black smoke, and the earth reeked of iron and ash. Charred fields stretched for miles, littered with broken carts, shattered weapons, and the husks of what had once been homes. I walked through it all, each step pressing deep into scorched soil, each breath steady despite the chaos around me. There was no ceremony, no grand return, no herald to declare my arrival. I wasn't here for titles or redemption. I came because I chose to. Not out of duty to the kingdom that once spat on my name, but for those who could not protect themselves, for those who still believed in seeds even when the world offered only fire. The Demon King's army had changed. It was no longer a wild horde of monsters and beasts. Now it moved like a machine, ranks of armored demons, corrupted humans, and soulless constructs. I watched them from the ridge, counting the cadence of their march, their blind obedience. They had no connection to the land beneath them. They trampled nature like it was meaningless. But the forest remembered. I raised my hand, and the grove responded. From my belt, I pulled a cluster of obscura nuts, each one coated with blackened sap and layered spores. I threw them high, and the wind scattered their contents across the front lines. Within seconds, vines erupted from the soil, wrapping around limbs, weapons, and necks. Confusion spread, and then panic. The first skirmish wasn't a battle, it was a lesson. I was not a warrior. I was a cultivator of life, and I would teach them what it meant to wage war against the roots of the earth. More villages followed, some already destroyed, some teetering on the edge of collapse. I moved between them like a ghost, planting seeds in the dark, nurturing resistance where none had bloomed before. Survivors took shelter beneath trees I had touched. Hunters were given bags of ember nuts and told when to throw them. Farmers used my powders to heal infected wounds and tainted wells. Bit by bit, hope returned. They called it the Green Rebellion, not led by kings or lords, but by whispers from the woods. They spoke of a man in bark-stitched robes, silver-haired and scar-eyed, walking with beasts and breathing with trees. I let the rumors grow. A myth did more for morale than a man ever could. But deep inside, I knew it wouldn't be enough. The Demon King was awakening. I could feel it in the way the air thickened at night, in the way trees bowed not to wind but to pressure. Magic was distorting. Even my Kinomi grew erratic. Some bloomed too early, others refused to ripen. The balance was breaking, and at the center of it all pulsed a will that resonated with mine in a cruel, familiar rhythm. I knew who he was before I ever saw him. Another summoned soul, another discarded name, another product of a broken summoning ritual that tore people from worlds they never asked to leave. But while I had turned to the soil, he had turned to flame. Our clash was inevitable. The Demon King's fortress was built upon a dead forest. Blackened trunks stood like tombstones, and the ground pulsed with cursed veins of mana. It was not a place for Kinomi. Nothing grew here anymore, not naturally. But I had come prepared. I stepped beyond the first gate alone. My armor hummed with the essence of iron nut bark, my boots rooted into the soil with every step. I carried no sword. My weapons were hanging pouches of seeds and the countless lessons written into my bones. He met me at the heart of his ruined garden. He wore a human form, though it twisted with flickers of shadow and fire. His gaze burned. I could see the echo of the same despair I had once known, the same bitterness. But where I had sought understanding, he had clung to vengeance. Our battle was not like those told in taverns. There were no spectacular clashes, no thunderous cries. It was quiet, precise. Each movement was layered with memory. He conjured flames from the depths of the earth, but I answered with vaporized sap nuts that stole oxygen from the air. He shattered the ground with corrupted mana, but I sank into it with root nuts, letting the earth cradle and propel me. He was furious. I was formed. He fought like someone with nothing to lose. I fought like someone who had already lost and found something better. We fought for hours, maybe days. Time warped around us, twisted by the clash of polar wills. And when the moment came, I didn't kill him. I reached into my pouch and withdrew the soul nut. The rarest Kinomi I had ever cultivated. Born from years of growth, from watching hundreds of species blend, die, and rise again. A single seed capable of unlocking memory not through power, but through truth. I placed it before him and stepped back. He took it. The change was immediate. His fire faltered, then dimmed. His eyes flickered not with rage but remembrance, and as he crumbled, I saw something that broke me. He smiled. He didn't vanish in a blaze or scream in defiance. He just disappeared, like fog in sunlight, as if finally he had come home. When the war ended, I returned to the forest. They offered me everything: castles, crowns, and legacies. They spoke of statues, temples, and feast days. I refused them all. That was not the story I wanted written in stone. Instead, I returned to the canopy hut I had once built, now overgrown and blooming with rare Kinomi. The girl from before came back, this time not to learn, but to teach others. She brought children, widows, displaced souls. I taught them not with sermons, but with seeds. The Kinomi order was born not as a church or an army, but as a sanctuary, a place where those broken by war, by rejection, or by grief could find healing in the soil. Each one planted a tree when they arrived. Each one tended to it like a piece of their soul. The years passed like falling leaves, my hair turned white, then wispy. My limbs grew stiff, my steps slower, but my roots stretched deep. I wasn't afraid. Sometimes I walked alone to the oldest grove, the place where I had eaten my first Kinomi and remembered who I was. I would sit there and listen. The forest spoke if you knew how to hear it. The rustle of branches carried names. The breeze hummed with lullabies of those who had come and gone. I had no family in this world, no grave in the past, but here I was remembered by trees, and trees do not forget. On my final day, I woke early. The sun hadn't yet pierced the mist, and the grove was silver with dew. I dressed in my oldest barkweave cloak and carried one last seed in my hand. The Eternut. A Kinomi I had cultivated in secret. Its effects were unknown. No one had ever eaten it, not even me, but I didn't plan to consume it. Instead, I planted it. Beneath the heart tree where it would take root not in battle or bitterness, but in peace. I pressed the soil gently, stood back, and smiled. Then I sat down beside it. And let the wind carry me. I don't know what came after. Perhaps nothing. perhaps rebirth. Perhaps I became the tree. But I know this, I was not summoned to save a kingdom. I was summoned to become something no one expected. Something the world didn't know it needed. I was the Kinomi master. And that was enough.